You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And welcome back to another episode of Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
On this episode, we'll be discussing our September book club pick, #1 Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Lee.
Hey, Books and Boba is 2 years old now.
Oh, wow, it is.
Yeah. We started in September 2016, so...
Yeah, so this was our 24th book.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and we read more for author interviews,
We
too.
have, yeah.
So...
Yeah, I feel like it's been a while since we've talked. The last time I saw you was
It's
when
been a
we
month.
recorded the To All the Boys I Loved Before interview.
Yeah.
And that was like...
Well,
yeah,
not
that was
an
like
interview. It was a round table.
Right. So it's been a while. How's your September been?
It's been okay. Like I went to a K-pop concert. I went to a BTS concert. It was the best concert of my life. So that was great. I missed a lot of figure skating, so I'm still catching up on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
Is that still going on?
no, I think it's slowly wrapping up. It's just like
I thought it's...
I've missed so many programs. They also changed the rules for the long program. So now it's shorter.
So this is the actual like league of figure skaters, not the Olympics, right? Because the
Yeah,
Olympics they don't take over for the worlds.
No.
Okay.
So I'm still catching up on that. Yeah, and you've been at TIFF.
I went to TIFF, watched a bunch of movies, caught a screening of The Hate You Give,
My favorite book from 2017.
which was pretty good. I recommend it. It's coming out later this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that'd be good.
I remember when casting news came out for that. It's been like a long process for it to actually get made into a movie.
But not too long.
Not too long. I mean, I guess so, but
a year is a pretty short turnaround for a movie.
well, I
right?
feel like I heard casting rumors like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So, well, we have some book deals and a little bit of news to get through before we talk about #1 Chinese Restaurant.
Yeah. It's been a month, so let's catch up on what's coming up in the pipeline. First up, in a 2-book deal, Abrams bought FCE's YA novel set in the universe of Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. Michael Dante DiMartino, co-creator and executive producer of both series, consulted on the story. The first novel, The Rise of Kyoshi, is slated for July 2019 and will unveil the backstory of Avatar Kyoshi.
Did you hear about the live-action TV series?
It's a Netflix thing, right?
Yeah, it's a Netflix thing. And Michael DiMartino is also consulting on that.
Okay.
So they really are like bringing back the series in like multiple forms. And FCE is the author of the epic Crush of Genie Lo.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I really love Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was severely disappointed by Shyamalama Ding Dong's version.
Shyamalan. Shyamalan.
I just really was disappointed.
I've never watched any Avatar or movie, the TV series or the movie.
Oh my God.
Ever. I think I caught the first episode of Legend of Korra.
No, you have to watch Avatar: The Last
was
Airbender.
But it was funny seeing like people were super excited that they're going to recast for the new TV series.
Yeah.
And the first fan cast that I read still had a white boy playing Aang.
No, oh my God. I'm going to be so mad if they don't cast Zuko right. Because it's just like, honor! Set things on fire if they don't do it right. Like, it's a series that is beloved to my heart. So I really hope that they do adapt it well. And also, Avatar Kyoshi is, like, she sounds badass in the series. So I'm really excited to read more about her.
So is this a prequel or a sequel?
It's a prequel.
Okay. Cool.
All right, next up. Coca-Cola acquired Randy Ribe's Patron Saints of Nothing. The story follows high school senior Jay Riguro, who returns to his birthplace in the Philippines to investigate the untimely death of his cousin at the hands of President Duterte's war on drugs. But instead of finding answers, he is faced with even more questions of identity, faith, and family. Publication is slated for summer 2019.
Wow. Is this meant to be like a YA book?
Yes. Considering that it follows a high school senior, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Congratulations to Randy.
Disney Press signed Aisha Saeed to write Far From Agrabah, an original novel inspired by the forthcoming live-action Aladdin film. Publication is set for spring 2019. I totally forgot they were making an Aladdin live-action
me
film.
too. Actually, Elizabeth Lim wrote the novel version of Mulan, and that came out back in March. So it seems like Disney Press is like, for each live-action movie, I guess they're like,
doing tie-in novels.
doing a tie-in. Maybe it's like their like plan B of like, oh, if the movie version pisses off a lot of people, at least we have like own voices authors covering these stories. But
like, given the stories coming from the set of Aladdin where they had to reshoot large portions of the film because the background characters were white, like it's.
I actually haven't heard that much about the live action Aladdin. Maybe it's because like immediately I thought they were going to fail. So I just like didn't pay attention. Same thing with Mulan. Like I was just like, are they going to do it right? Probably not.
What does right even look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, do you go Cinderella where you kind of make it an original thing, or do you go Beauty and the Beast and do a shot by shot?
I mean, it sounds like they're doing an original because Shang isn't even a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Shang wasn't really a character anyways. They made him up for the cartoon.
I know, but okay, well, Coca-Cola acquired Vera Hiranandani's new middle grade novel, The Sound of Summer, which is set in 1967, shortly after the Loving versus Virginia ruling. Sixth grader Ariel Goldberg finds her world rapidly shifting as her older sister elopes with an Indian college student against her parents' wishes, and is left to navigate family illness and her dysgraphia diagnosis on her own. Publication is planned for fall 2020. I had to actually look up what dysgraphia is, and it's like a learning challenge of like being able to write. So yeah, that I really don't know much about it. So it would be really interesting to.
Is it like a form of aphasia or like?
I wouldn't call it. I'm not sure if it belongs in the disability category, but like I do know that it is a condition that is found in children, and they just have like difficulty either retaining the short-term memory in order to like write the words, or they have trouble with like actually spelling the words on paper. No one really explained it well to me online, like how it works. So it would be interesting to learn more about it.
Yeah. Finally, Imprint bought animator and storyboard artist Louis Zong's debut picture book, tentatively titled Book Science. The story follows two scientists, a bear and a frog, who conduct hands-on experiments answering the age-old question, how do books work? Publication is planned for summer 2020. That sounds cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one piece of news that we are going to cover before we jump into our book club discussion. And it is a discussion that I really don't want to talk about, but we're going to cover it because it's been all over Asian American book
everyone's
Twitter.
Been talking about it.
I know.
We should at least touch on it. So, Rira, explain to me what's up with
what's happening?
The Crimes of Grindelwald.
Okay, so
Grindelwald.
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 I don't know. It's a fake wizard name for all I know. Okay, so the second Fantastic Beasts movie, they released the final trailer. And the final trailer revealed Claudia Kim's character. Claudia Kim is a South Korean actress. She was in Age of Ultron. And
she was a scientist.
Yeah, she was the scientist
and
lady.
she was also in Marco Polo-esque.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Marco Polo. I totally forgot. But yeah, it's been announced that she was playing a role in the movie, but no one knew like what character she was playing.
Well, she's Ezra Miller's friend from the first trailer. Like, you kind of see them sitting together in all the promo.
Yeah. So like no one really knew like what her character was until this trailer came out, and it's revealed that she is playing Nagini, who is Voldemort's pet snake or Horcrux in the books at least. Yeah, and she is a Maledictus, which is a woman with a blood curse that kind of is cursed to be a beast for all eternity. So she's kind of like a ticking bomb. One day she will become a snake forever, and it's kind of hinted that she'll lose all of her human memories, humanity. But of course, there was a lot of controversy over this because casting an East Asian woman to be a pet snake that is enslaved to a white man who is kind of like...
He's like wizard fascist.
Wizard Nazi. It's kind of viewed as stereotypical and like just how like...
It's not a good look.
Not a good look. Like it kind of like falls back on the whole evil, sexy dragon lady who... And also like the whole submissive trope of Asian women on screen. I feel like people wouldn't be so upset about this if Claudia Kim wasn't the second East Asian woman to be
ever.
in this movie, in this franchise, and
Or
also
if she wasn't the snake, if she was just like...
Yeah, like if she was an original character, like no one would care. But the fact that J.K. Rowling is retro, like fitting everything into her lore is kind of I don't know, like it's like it really rubs me the wrong way because I feel like it's bad writing. It's just like...
I mean, so from my perspective, as someone who is not like super, like I never, like listeners of this podcast would know I haven't read, and I still haven't read any of the books. I've only watched the movies. I don't have, Harry Potter wasn't something that was like integral to my upbringing coming into the world of fantasy writing and things like that, right? So, to me, I didn't have like the initial visceral reactions. It was more like that's interesting, and also kind of like we said, not a good look. To me, it kind of feels like, because the thing with like Fantastic Beasts is like this is like the second chance for the wizarding world to be a more like diverse, inclusive place, right? Because that's part of the reason why like people were excited about like seeing more of the wizarding world, right? And seeing more than just like white British people being wizards. So like, when we first learned of Claudia Kim being in this movie, like people were excited, like, oh, there's an Asian woman playing something, and then you learn that it's tied into the rest of the story, which brings along a lot of baggage. And
yeah, because like she's playing like she's playing pretty much like an object that gets killed by Neville Longbottom, and then J.K. Rowling is just like, it's like, oh, that snake that Neville killed, it used to be a human. Like, have some empathy. And it's like, you didn't write that. You didn't build that into the foundation of your books. So it feels really forced. It feels shoehorned. And like, to me, that disturbs me more than the actual like. But Ellen O, she had a really nice tweet about the whole thing, and I'm going to read it to you guys. I feel like this is the problem when white people want to diversify and don't actually ask people of color how to do so. They don't make the connection between making Nagini an Asian woman who later on is the pet of a white man. So I'm going to say it right now. This shit is racist. Yeah, and J.K. Rowling like responded to people on Twitter who are complaining about this, that like Nagas are based in Indonesian mythology, which like belongs to like hundreds of different ethnic groups in Indonesia. And of course that got, a lot of people were just like, no, actually like Naga mythology belongs in Indian. It comes from India, and Nagin is a Sanskrit language. And I don't know, the whole thing seems kind of like shaky research to me. Like, I feel like if you were going to take mythology from a different culture, a different country, you really have to do your research, and you really have to like show depth in your research. Yeah. And I just feel like it was just kind of tossed into the movie lore. I just feel like it wasn't there wasn't that much thought.
Yeah, I mean, they expected like a pat on the back for being like, look, we drew from all these different mythologies, but you realize that like that's not enough these days, especially when your fan base is so like particular. You know?
Also, like a common complaint that I've seen is like, oh, why did Claudia Kim accept the role if it was a problematic role that like enforced these stereotypes? And I really don't want to blame an actor for taking a job because it is hard enough to make it in the entertainment industry, especially if you are like from a marginalized group. And with that said, Claudia Kim is South Korean. Like, she only spent maybe 6 years of her life in America. So I'm not really sure what her relationship is with like the Asian American community and like what her framework is when it comes to like thinking about stereotypes in Hollywood movies and whatnot.
I mean, when it comes down to it, like the track record of the Wizarding World and like race relations has never been great, right?
I mean, that's the thing. You can like problematic things, just know that they're problematic. Like, I will always love Lord of the Rings, but there are some things in there that is not okay, like colorism.
Yeah.
And same thing with Harry Potter. Like,
well, I have a feeling I might be watching this movie, so I'll keep you up to date on how they do.
No, you don't have to keep me up to date. I'm fine.
And on that note, that'll do it for our book news. Let's move on to the real reason why we're here, to discuss our September book club pick, #1 Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Lee. I guess we'll start with the book jacket. The Beijing Duck House in Rockville, Maryland is not only a go-to solution for hunger pangs and a beloved setting for celebrations, it is its own world, inhabited by waiters and kitchen staff who have been fighting, loving, and aging within its walls for decades. When disaster strikes, this working family's controlled chaos is set loose, forcing each of them to confront the conflicts that fast-paced restaurant life has kept at bay. Owner Jimmy Han hopes to leave his late father's homespun establishment for a fancier one. Jimmy's older brother Johnny and Johnny's daughter Annie ache to return to a time before a father's absence and a teenager's silence pushed them apart. Nan and Jack, longtime Duck House employees, are tempted to turn their 30-year friendship into something else, even as Nan's son Pat struggles to stay out of trouble. And when Pat and Annie, caught in a mix of youthful lust and boredom, find themselves in a dangerous game that implicates them in the Duck House's tragedy, their families must decide how much they're willing to sacrifice to help their children.
So Marvin, you're the one who picked this book for this month. What were your expectations?
I have been hearing a lot of good things about it. It's been covered like on a couple of the podcasts I listen to, actually. Specifically some of the food focused ones. Yeah. I mean, reading through it, I thought this was a pretty like good follow-up to Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Why do you think so?
Because this is one of those books like about a family that on the surface is rich, but it doesn't shy away from like all the shady things that they had to do to get there.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Like for me, like from the title #1 Chinese Restaurant, I thought it was going to be more about the competition between the two brothers, Johnny and Jimmy. Because I was just like, okay, like it's going to be like Jimmy wants to build his own restaurant that's like more upscale, more Pan-Asian, whereas Johnny wants to keep his dad's legacy going. So I thought it was going to be more about those two butting heads. So I was kind of surprised that it kind of like the story kind of panned out to include all these different characters. And I'm not sure if that expectation made me feel a little bit overwhelmed by just like how much was going on and how many characters were in play. But I really do like how Lillian captured the chaotic order. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's so chaotic in the restaurant, but everything is like where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And like, it just like runs seamlessly.
I mean, part of what drew me to the story was it was a description of a world that like only immigrant families can like kind of fathom. You know, like it's, have you ever seen, there's this documentary called The Search for General Tso.
Oh, yeah. That documentary is great, by the way.
Which is all about like the search for like this dish, General Tso's chicken, and how authentic it is, and like essentially is a history of Chinese food restaurants around the country, and the reason why in every small town in America you can find a Chinese restaurant run by Chinese families and Chinese workers.
Yeah.
Right.
And also like that I mean, we're talking about the documentary, but like that documentary, what I really liked about it was it showed different types of Chinese restaurants. You've seen like fancier ones that are like that specializes in northern Chinese cuisine that is like way more authentic. And then you have like takeout joints, and then you have like more like middle tier that's like not really northern cuisine, but they just label it Chinese food.
I don't even think I think a lot of it is you realize that the high class places and the less high class places all serve the same kind of Americanized Chinese food. They're just like, it's a perception thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's also a method for them to survive.
I mean, the title itself is kind of telling because, like, say if this was a book about, I don't know, like a French restaurant, like number one French restaurant.
Yeah.
What does that even mean, right? But then like number one Chinese restaurant, you like immediately can like picture what the book is going to be like, what the restaurant's going to be like, despite what the price range is.
And it's like you hear that and you know, like, this probably isn't the best Chinese restaurant in the world, but to the owner who thinks he's a genius on marketing, it's like it's positioned themselves as the number one Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
But yeah, the book turned out to be more of like a family drama, really. And I mean, I don't want to keep comparing to like Crazy Rich Asians, but like the mom plays a way better like scheming like maternal figure than Eleanor from Kevin Kwan's book did.
Yeah, with the mother, what was her name? Fei Feng?
Fan Fei.
Fan Fei.
Fan Fei, yeah.
Yeah, so like with Fan Fei, the mother, I was kind of surprised at how late that came in the book.
Well, she was always like, I think it was really smartly done where the entire book, they portray her as, at least from the perspective of the sons, as like a weak woman who needs to be taken care of. She should be sent, like, she's too weak to be living in that big house. We should send her to an old folks home, which is like the nightmare of any Asian parent living in America. And then you realize that no, she's the brains of this family.
Yeah, but I feel
or like
like
the self-proclaimed brain of the family.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like pretty surprised by that, and not in a good way. Like,
Really?
I feel like there should have been a little bit more foreshadowing to that. I just felt like all of a sudden she's like, okay, I'm going to take control now. Like, I felt like it should have been more gradual in a sense, or she came into the game much earlier.
I don't even think it was like that. I don't think she had a change of character. I think she was always controlling things from the background. You didn't realize until you came from her perspective. But even her controlling things was in a very like passive aggressive and kind of scheming way, right? She didn't want she doesn't want anyone to know that she knows things and was in charge of things. You know? So like, even though the chapter from her perspective I felt like was very strong, the way that she went about the actual actions she took was still very slight and behind the scenes. Right?
Yeah. I wish I got more context of who the father was, because, you know, the father is deceased and he left this legacy, and there's like, and of course, like Jimmy and Johnny have different relationships with their father and what the restaurant means. But I kind of wish I knew more about their father, because I feel like I didn't really understand who he was as a person, aside from the fact that like he had very little ambition or a lot of like know-how, and his wife was the one who like made the restaurant happen.
I think it comes down to, I think that was intentional, right? It's this book is a lot about like the economic trauma suffered by like middle class immigrant families, right? Where like the children inherit this like expectations of like a culture where they don't communicate well. They never did with their father. They obviously don't with their mother and with each other, right? And his legacy is different to every member of the family.
Yeah.
Right? You piece together parts of the story, right? You piece together that the father, Johnny, came to America and intended to run away before the mother tracked him down and like forced him to like bring them over. But you realize during her chapter that it was actually her that paid, who got Uncle Peng to like bring them over to find them.
I guess like there's a lot of generational stories going on because you have Jimmy and Johnny's relationship with their father and mother, and then you have Annie, who is Johnny's daughter, and how she feels about the restaurant. And also you have like another layer with like Nan and Pat, who, you know, like Pat and Annie are both children of restaurant owners, not owners, but they both have parents who work in the restaurant industry, and it's a really hard job.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard job with not a lot of time to spend with your family. And the thing is, like, with Nan and with Johnny, they are spending all this time working, thinking that it's best for their children, right? It's like, I'm working this much so that it'll pay off in the end, so that they'll go to good colleges or they don't have to toil like me. But like at the same time, like that kind of sacrifice is kind of seen as unwanted or seen as kind of like spiteful from Annie and Pat's point of view, because it's like, oh, I would have preferred if you spent more time with me as a kid rather than like focusing so much on work. And also like when Annie and Pat when they work at the restaurant, they're seeing their parents in a totally different light. So it's not like the parents that they know from home are completely different from them working at the restaurant. So it's kind of like, I forgot who said it. Was it Annie or Pat? But they said like, oh, our parents are like cartoon characters at this restaurant. So I think Lillian really captured that like resentment, and also like this like paired the resentment of the children and also like the love and sacrifice of the parents. I think she like melded those two really well together, which is why I was like really drawn into Nan and Pat's storyline, because there was like a lot of like push and pull to it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that way between Johnny and Anya as well, where like they're both, things could be solved just by like just being open and honest with everyone. But you're talking about teenagers and parents, and
you're talking about teenagers and parents from with language barriers as well. I feel like there is a language barrier just in the way that like Nan speaks to Pat, and also just like with Annie, she kind of mocks her father's accent, even though he can speak English proficiently, fluently. He still has an accent, and he still slows down to make sure his words are being understood. And she does like kind of mock him for it. So there is a little bit of just like, okay, well, I'm American, and you know, you're not American enough. Your English is not enough. So there is like a sense of there is a gap there between like the kid and their parent.
What I liked about the portrayal is that because you can see in the thoughts of everyone involved, and like a petulant teenager, both Annie and Pat know exactly what they're doing. Like when they're talking to their parents, know exactly like when they push things too far or like are being unreasonable. But at the same time, like like what teenagers hate the most is parents who are hypocrites, right?
Yeah.
Or they see as hypocrites, and they see the whole restaurant as like, it's interesting because you can tell that both Annie and Pat, the kids, they're like teenagers, love their parents, but it's like kind of, it's hard for them to express it. And the parents take it different ways too. It's just similar to like Jimmy and Johnny and their mom too.
Yeah.
Right?
It seems like no one in the story has like a good romantic relationship.
Yeah.
I wonder if I'm pretty sure that's like intentional, but it was just like you have Nan, who has like a bi-coastal relationship with her husband. She's not divorced yet, but they're separated. And I'm not sure about Jimmy. Jimmy Jimmy's wife
Jimmy has an ex-wife.
has an ex-wife.
Yeah.
Actually, Johnny is still married to his wife, so I guess that's okay. But it just seemed like everyone was in a very unhappy marriage when I was like reading the book. And
I mean, part of like one of the themes of this story is kind of the eternal elusiveness of the American dream and how it in itself is an illusion, right? Like it doesn't happen for anyone in the story without strings attached. Right? Jimmy doesn't get his new restaurant without having to go into business with Uncle Pang. And like later on you realize that the Uncle Pang is closest to the mom.
yeah.
Right?
How did you feel about Uncle Pang?
Uncle Pang is a character that personifies, like, if you ever gone to a Chinese wedding where the bride and groom's actual friends and family take up like 10% of the entire banquet hall. The rest of those seats are all Uncle Pang's, like people that the parents had to do business with in order to like make it in America, right? And it's a lot of like they're always going to be around. They're essentially like they're family, but your tie is money, right?
See, like with Uncle Pang, I don't know, like in a sense, I wish that he wasn't a character in this book. Because I felt like I got distracted by the whole insurance fraud thing. Because I was like, okay, this is reading a little bit too much like Godfather to me. Of just like, oh, like you give me a little bit like from your pile and I'll take care of the rest. Like, I just felt like it distracted me from the family drama that was happening. And it was just too much plot into character development. I don't know. Like I
feel like you don't get this family drama and you don't get the story without a character like Uncle Pang.
But I feel like it would have happened regardless without Uncle Pang. Like I felt like the story would have been more focused. I don't know. I just felt like the whole burning down the restaurant in order to like get the insurance money.
I don't think that was ever the plan.
It wasn't the plan, but I felt like that part of the book.
Well, that's the inciting drama, right? That's what brings Johnny back from abroad and it re-enters the story, right? Yeah,
but then Johnny comes back from abroad like really late in the book too.
Yeah,
that's another thing. I feel like for me, like I think it's because I went into this book thinking that it was going to be a completely different story from what I thought it would be, and the entire time I was just like, wait, like this isn't.
See, I didn't have any expectations. I liked how it started off with one perspective and started branching out as it went along.
See, I was a little bit annoyed by that too, because I was like, why are there so many perspectives? Like, why is it jumping back and forth between characters within the same chapter? Yeah, it was kind of like an issue that I had with Crazy Rich Asians, where like you have character head jumping and it's like, okay,
but there's dividers and then you clearly see whose perspective it is,
but it's still
right?
in the same chapter though.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that at all.
Like, yeah, I mean everybody has like different opinions and like come away from reading a book like with different experiences. With me, I just felt like I don't know. It was like I felt overwhelmed and underwhelmed at the same time. I felt overwhelmed by how much plot was going into it, how much insurance fraud, how much... I
mean, I even think like insurance fraud comes into it when Jimmy decides to use the money to fund his new restaurant.
Yeah.
But that was before he realized that it was Uncle Pen that set the fire.
Yeah.
Right? Insurance fraud. I think the insurance fraud angle not comes from the police when they realized it was an arson. But I don't think anyone ever like... I
guess what I mean by like the insurance fraud plot line is like getting Uncle Pang to bribe Pat and then Pat getting Annie and them unwittingly set the restaurant on fire, which seemed like an accident on Pat's part. It feels like he didn't want to actually burn the place down. He just wanted to take the money and just like have fun with it.
The way that I read into it was Uncle Pang had set up the fraud. Like he was going to burn down the duck house to pay for the Beijing Glory. When Jimmy, because in the first chapter, Jimmy decides to pull out from the deal to cut him out because of what his real estate agent, who like he's also attracted to, told him about it. And so, as revenge, Uncle Pang said, "Well, if you're going to do this, I'm just going to burn it down now because I know it's set to blow." right? Because there's accelerants in the trash can. So he pays Pat because he knows that Pat got in trouble for burning down, like for fire, setting a fire to get expelled, right? So he didn't bribe him. He was just like, you do a job for me, like burn these documents in the trash can. Right.
Was it documents?
Yeah, he told him to burn something in the trash can for him.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, like I just like even you just like telling me what happened is like that is a lot.
Well, because Uncle Pang wanted revenge. Like he wanted to, like, the duck house burning down unexpectedly would throw a wrench into everything.
Well, yeah, like I understand like the inciting incident. I understand how it sets things in motion. I just feel like it was. It was just like a lot, and I felt like that kind of plotting didn't. I don't know. It just like.
I mean, so to me, I feel like a story like this, especially talking about like a Chinese immigrant business, like there has to be a character. Like, Uncle Pang. If it wasn't Uncle Pang, it would have been like a group of Uncle Pangs or like a credit union or some sort of like, because immigrant families, a lot of them use under the table funds and like, you know, lines of credit to build up businesses because they can't get loans. They couldn't get loans from the banks because they had no credit. Mm-hmm. Right. So an Uncle Pang character, I can see what you mean by like he didn't really have to exist. But this type of story to tell the story of a Chinese restaurant, especially Chinese business, not having a character like Uncle Pang would have been non-authentic, you know?
Okay, yeah. Like, yeah, now that you say that, yeah, I can like see why why like an Uncle Pang character would be needed for like a Chinese restaurant.
And the fact that even at the end, they couldn't get rid of him.
No.
Because he was he was tied up with the mom, and B, in the end, they still needed his help for like all the mistakes that they ran into, like getting Pat out of jail and things like that.
I guess for me, I really thought that this book was going to be more like, I mean, not to say that it wasn't family focused, because it definitely was, but like I was surprised by like Jimmy and Janine and like Nan and what is it? Ajax. Yeah, like. Yeah. Like, I was just like, there's so many, like, weird love triangles happening. And, like, for me, I was just like, oh, I really wanted kind of like a slice of life look into running a Chinese restaurant and then having these two brothers kind of compete in what they believe is like good, what is believed to be a good Chinese restaurant. And like I feel like you don't really see the competition between Johnny and Jimmy. I feel like Johnny is constantly telling Jimmy like no, this is like no, think of our father. I just felt like he didn't take enough action, whereas like with Jimmy, I found him to be a more engaging character.
It's as an older brother, I sympathize with Johnny more. Actually.
Oh, I'm an older sibling too,
like,
so
the fact that they were competing in terms of like what they felt like was the future. Even Johnny, in terms of like wanting to like keep the duck house, was thinking along the same lines as Jimmy was. I can do the duck house, but I can do it better, right? Because so there's a chapter talking about Johnny's like kind of journey from like working as an engineer and coming back and taking over the duck house. Like his dad brought him as a manager, and realizing all the lies it was built on. Like all the pictures on the wall of celebrities from the 70s, those are all bribed. Like they were bribed to come for a free meal and took a picture. So he decided, okay, we're gonna start a charity. We're gonna start being a more active part of the community to like create real soft power for the restaurant. And that was his vision, right? To like take his dad's like fantasy and turn into reality. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jimmy, he saw all that as like his brother just trying to like soak up the glamour and the fame. What he wanted was like he wanted to be a fine dining restaurant. He staged at like a really like a Michelin starred restaurant, and like he was into it for like the prestige of having a good restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. And they were both after different aspects of it. But in the end, like Jimmy reminded me of who was the younger brother in Pachinko, the one that
Mosasu?
Yeah. He reminded Mosasu as the kid who like he could never compete with his older brother, and in essence still worshipped his older brother. But he wanted to like he figured he'll just do his own thing, And that involved a more less legit path, right? He dabbled in dealing drugs. He was more at home with the back of the house group, like the chefs and the cooks, and he wanted to be like them.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it would have been nice if, I mean, like, I understand that, like, Johnny would not have come back unless, like, the duck house burned down, because that is the reason why he comes back. Mm-hmm. But it would have been nice if, like, Jimmy had already, like, started his restaurant and, like, Johnny is forced back to, like, kind of handle the duck house as it was. And him learning how, like, his vision for, like, a better version of the duck house isn't, like, it won't work without Jimmy. It won't work without like having Jimmy's know-how. Whereas like with Jimmy, when he's like working with his restaurant, he understands that they're like just having good food isn't enough. Like there is like you need to have politics involved in order to like have a good restaurant. And him just like hiring chefs without like really testing their skills or testing how well they interact with the crew.
He even has the imposter syndrome where he's there now and he realizes he's amongst like these other sit down restaurants and he doesn't know if like his dishes will match up.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I just like really wanted these two brothers to have like two restaurants that are like kind of like incomplete without each other. And like, I don't know. I just felt like Jimmy and Johnny
that's a different story.
It is a different story. That's why I was like I had trouble reading this. And like, I don't know. I just felt like Jimmy and Johnny, I didn't really see that camaraderie until like the very end when they're, when like Johnny is picking up Jimmy from jail and being like, hey, like. Even
then, I feel like, I mean, it's definitely like a brother relationship where like you don't like each other, but you still love each other, right? And I think the mom's chapter says it best, where like Jimmy gets things done, but he'll never stand up to his brother because he still worships him.
Yeah.
Right. And even when it comes to when they both realize that Pat was the one that set the fire, Jimmy wants Johnny to do it because in the end, Johnny would be able to, and he wouldn't.
With Annie and Johnny, though, like. So, like, Annie thinks that she's going to be arrested by the cops because she thinks that Pat has ratted on her. Mm-hmm. And then she is staying with Nan. And Nan tells Johnny, like, you know, your daughter was involved. And, like, at that point, Johnny's just like, well, I guess I'll do the right thing and, like, turn her in. And Nan is just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, she's your daughter. Like, you're going to, like, turn her into the cops because it's the right thing to do? Like, what kind of father are you? And it kind of just ends on that note. I don't think there is like a scene with Annie and Johnny after that, right?
Yeah, there isn't. But I think it's more like what that scene was meant to convey was like a lot of the struggle in this book was what exactly does it mean to be American too, right? It's kind of, if you look at like the Duck House as like organized crime, whatever, like both Johnny and Jimmy wanted to like get out, like go straight, but like the politics of like just like the familial and like filial piety and whatever, like in the end they have to rely on Uncle Pang, the personification of like the underworld, right, to keep their family together.
Yeah.
Right. And you see both of them, especially Johnny, struggle with like Johnny was always like he was the golden child, right? And to him, like maybe part of him wanted to like be completely legit. Like we have to play by the rules, right? We have to play by the rules of this country, and that's what I want this American dream to be. Right, Jimmy was more like he wants to follow his dream, but at what cost? Right,
yeah,
Jimmy
like he'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
yeah.
Johnny was almost willing to give up his daughter's future and freedom to pursue, to like appear on the up and up, right?
Yeah.
To appear untouchable or to maintain that untouchableness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of ironic how Jimmy, when he opens his new restaurant, Glory, and he's like, oh, I'm going to serve fine dining food. But then the food doesn't turn out to be good. And for his soft opening, all people are asking for are like the Duck House's signature dishes, and he's just like, they're asking for the bad Chinese food when this is like supposed to be fine dining, and none of his chefs know how to like even fry rice properly. So he's like showing them how to cook and everything.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of my favorite scenes in this book, where he's like, okay, well, obviously, like this is what people want, so I have to like cater to them. And like I feel like with Jimmy, he's kind of had this chip on his shoulder, being like, oh, like being Chinese American means like having bad Chinese food. Like,
I mean, isn't that the chip on the shoulder of every time you see like a P.F. Chang's type of like fine Chinese, like Asian fusion, or like some sort of like, whenever you see some like non-Asian person selling Asian food, but like at a $10 markup.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the fact that like we can't sell our own food and charge what it should be worth. We can't even sell our own food. We have to sell someone else's version of our food in order to succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
So I found that really interesting, where he's just like, oh, like Chinese food sucks, but like wait, what was the line that he says? He says that it's like, yeah, we're rich or we have money, but we still work at a shitty Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's like a really poignant point. And I don't know if Jimmy actually has, like if he kind of hates his own culture for a little bit, and it's just like, well, like this, like at the end of the book, he's just like, well, I have to serve this food because this is part of like how to make it in America. So.
It's also that he has no, like, he doesn't have, like, a lot of Jimmy's story was kind of seeing how he came to this point where he really has no other options. Like, he had his dream job, but he was thrown out because he was too eager to please, right?
Well, he was also dealing cocaine.
Yeah, because he was too eager to please. Like, people were, like, the sous chef was using him for his drugs and his hookups.
Yeah, but he was selling drugs because of Uncle Peng.
Well, he was already selling drugs, but he got thrown out because he was selling drugs to the staff.
Yeah, but like he was still selling drugs on behalf of Uncle Peng, wasn't he?
I don't think Uncle Peng gave him drugs to sell specifically to the restaurant. He was already dealing.
Yeah.
And as long as he wasn't dealing to the restaurant, I don't think he would have gotten thrown out, right?
No. I just found it really jarring. I was just like, wait, he's a cocaine dealer? Like I thought he was I thought he was training to be a chef, but
yeah.
Oh no, like yeah, that was like another like additional like plot point where I was just like, wait. Like,
well, I think Uncle Peng was known to be a coke dealer or a dealer. Like he was known to like dabble in other illegal stuff. That was part of the reason why Pat was initially hesitant to accept the package. Mm-hmm. Right, because he thought he wanted him to deal, which he didn't want to do, but he just wanted him to burn something.
Yeah.
Right.
We haven't really talked about Ajak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Ajak just, I think it was cool to have also the separate storyline of the workers, right? Because you see how the other side also has this, you have the owners who ostensibly are rich, mm-hmm. but then you have like the poor immigrants who have to work like as servers, as waiters.
Yeah, who only gets like one free day out of the week, and the only moments of like happiness that you really see are like when they have their smoke break, when they're having like their family meals. And yeah, there is like a contrast to that. And also not just with the waiters, but also with like the bus boys. They call the Hondurans amigos, and there's like there's a hierarchy there too. And
I've heard that term a lot growing up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Chinese people just call any Hispanic amigos.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I found Ajak to be kind of like a coddled baby in a way, because
he's a man-child.
Yeah, he's a man-child because like he's taking advantage of like Nan's kindness pretty much. Mm-hmm. And he seemed like really impulsive as well, which, you know, makes sense because he's a gambler. Yeah. And he has diabetes and he still eats things that are not healthy for him. But I did like his role in Nan and Pat's relationship, because with Pat, he loves his mother, but at the same time, like he didn't really see much of her. And Nan has spent more time with the restaurant staff. So when Pat actually goes to work at the restaurant, he sees like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, like she is able to have this special relationship with Ajak, but like with me, like it's not like to him it's just like, oh, it's not as close, it's not as intimate because she has spent more time with Ajak. So like I did like Ajak's role in the mother-son relationship. Kind of weird with the whole Michelle and Gary plot line. Like I said before, I wish it focused more on the family because the love triangle stuff kind of distracted me. But
I don't even think it was a love triangle.
I mean, it sort of was.
It's so to me, it worked as character building for Ajak as someone who is super self-centered, who like in the end, like overall, really he cared about the people around him, but he cared more about his own like kind of survival and his own well-being.
Yeah.
Right. He was able to have this relationship with Nan but not get too serious because he had Michelle at home. Right. He had a wife to take care of. And realizing that she was cheating on him, like there was that whole segment where he was so like indignant about it. Like he was like literally throwing a tantrum. Right.
Yeah.
And like it also goes to like Nan's character of someone who like had like almost no backbone, right? Like she didn't really want anything to change, wasn't really willing to like.
She was self-sacrificing to
Yeah.
like so much because she does get a job at a job offer at some point. It was like working at an office and she had guaranteed weekends even though she was going to get paid less, and it was more of like a career that she can work her way up, but she decides to not take it because of Ajak.
Yeah. Like I feel like he was kind of almost
He's
like
a parasite, yeah.
character, and you can tell that like Pat like initially like sees him like when growing up he was always like a family friend, but seeing like the way that he treated it and used his mother, like it just made him more and more angry about it. I thought I don't know, I thought it was like the relationships are complicated, but you see that like Nan's character in itself is a very her character, like her self-worth is built around her being a caretaker, right? And because she can't take care of her son anymore, she kind of needs to take care of Ajak too, right?
Yeah. I feel like there was so much going on with Nan, Pat, and Ajak. I feel like that could have even been a separate book because of so much content. And
I mean, it all revolves around the duck house.
I know it does.
There, right?
It does.
And I mean, the stories are all interwoven because of the fire.
Yeah.
Right. And how it involves both, like the kids from both families.
I thought like Annie and Pat's relationship was like kind of like a flash in the pan. It was like, okay, like we were just introduced to these characters and they're having sex in
Well,
like,
they're the only
storage.
two teenagers in the entire restaurant.
Yeah, but then like their relationship got like never really resolved in the end.
Well, it got complicated.
I mean, it got complicated, yeah, but I just felt like I needed that like little bit of resolution for me to have felt a little bit
Like
better.
you wanted more catharsis from all the different plot lines?
Like I felt like there wasn't enough of like a togetherness with the family at the end of the book.
Because there wasn't.
There wasn't, but like I wish there was.
I mean, they decided not to tell the mother that she almost got her granddaughter arrested.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was because Johnny was tired of her like playing her games too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, like you don't really see Annie working with her family in the end. You don't really see Johnny and Jimmy working together as a team. It's almost as if like everybody is just doing their own thing. And I just felt like I wanted to see the family come together more at the end.
Oh. I was okay with it. Because to me, it was everyone like the whole like the whole book like was pretty much like everyone has their own idea of what success is in America.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it makes sense that like because if Johnny went to go work with Jimmy or Jimmy returned to work with Johnny, it would have been both of them having to give up a portion of what they thought success would mean, right?
Or working together in order to make it work. But I said this in Crazy Rich Asians, and it was, I don't mind flawed character as long as it's not written flawed. And I think Lillian did a really good job writing her characters, because I didn't like almost all of her characters. I thought they were incredibly flawed, but
Well,
I understood where each one came from. I understood their relationship with each other. I understood their grief and their insecurities and why they did the things that they did, even though I was just like, why did you do that? Like, I wish it happened like this and blah, blah, blah. Like, I have my own opinions on like how I wish the story played out or what kind of book this should have been. But I respected her characters. I really respected her prose. I really, really enjoyed how she described scenes and how she described, there were a lot of like flashbacks to like Jimmy thinking about like what we said before when he was working at that Michelin star restaurant, and Johnny when he gave up his job at like a research lab. Like there were a lot of flashbacks, and I did really like that because you got to know more of the characters. So yeah, like flawed characters, but written exceptionally well. So well done.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of the few books that we've disagreed on almost every single level. That's quite impressive.
Well, I mean, it's as like a Chinese person, a lot of it did kind of speak out to me on additional level, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You know how like in movies, like the movie title, they say the movie title at some point in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like with Crazy Rich Asians in the book, it's like, your family are crazy rich Asians. I feel like there wasn't that in the book. Like, #1 Chinese restaurant. I felt like it should have.
I think it was implied.
I don't know. I feel like it should have been there. Like, I feel like there should have been a line.
I mean, it was. I think it was implied when Johnny was describing how his father ran the restaurant as like the #1 Chinese restaurant, when it really wasn't. I mean, I think that's the theme. Like, kind of, like it's an aspirational thing more than a physical thing.
Oh yeah, I know
right?
It's not a physical thing. I just felt like.
Like both Johnny and Jimmy were both trying to make the #1 Chinese restaurant. Are still trying to make the #1 Chinese restaurant.
Someone should have said it.
I mean,
I feel like I've been criticizing this book in this entire episode, and yeah, I probably did, but I want to say I did enjoy the book. Don't get me wrong. I had I had a good time reading it. Maybe I am not the target reader for this book. And that is totally okay. Am I glad that I read it? Yes. So that's a thumbs up from me. So,
it's definitely like you don't expect like that much drama coming from a book called #1 Chinese Restaurant.
Actually, I expected a lot of drama, considering that it's it takes place in a restaurant family.
But it wasn't like a workplace drama as much.
Yeah, maybe that's why. It would have been nice if it was a workplace drama, but like you said earlier, it's a completely different book. Shouldn't shove my own ideas at somebody else. So
yeah. Well, I guess that'll do it for our discussion of #1 Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Lee. I think we both recommend it, right?
Yeah.
And if you have any thoughts to add to our discussion, please let us know on our Goodreads forums. You can join our Books and Boba group by going to goodreads.com and searching Books and Boba. We have a lot of different things that we're discussing. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about the book as well. Reba, why don't you tell us what we're reading for next month?
Yeah, so our October book club pick is Jose Antonio Vargas's Dear America.
And we'll be reading that in partnership with This Filipino American Life podcast. So we'll have to figure out how we're going to do a joint episode together.
I know, we have to figure that out.
But yeah, It's a great book. Jose Antonio Vargas was actually a guest on one of our fellow Potluck podcasts. They call us Bruce. So if you want to hear some of his words, if you want to hear some of what he has to say, go check them out as well.
I was really surprised that they did interview him because we knew that we were going to read this book before they did.
Yeah.
And Phil on his Instagram posted a picture of Dear America the book, and I was like, oh, we're reading that for Books and Boba. and then it's like, oh, they interviewed him, and I was like, okay, it's
That's cool.
a weird coincidence.
Yeah. Now you can listen to what we have to think about it.
Yeah.
As always, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. This episode of Books and Boba was recorded at the Potluck Podcast Studios, located within the Office of Visual Communications. Visual Communications is a nonprofit media organization supporting Asian American filmmakers through their programs such as the Art with a Camera Fellowship and the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. This podcast is also a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective. As we mentioned, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from all around our community. Learn more about our shows, including They Call Us Bruce, by going to our website at podcastpotluck.com. And on that note, Rira, thanks for discussing the One Chinese Restaurant with me.
Discussing or debating or fighting?
Still discussing. I don't think we're fighting.
No.
We'll see you next time on Books and Boba. Bye.
Bye.